voice. And okay, there we go. So we want to make sure everyone have the space to be heard and to express their opinion, but also so in a polite and reasonable way. So we have some functions we'll be using in terms of you can raise hands, but also using the chat box to have questions, and I'll try to facilitate and have this answered in a quick manner. But also when you're not talking, please mute your microphone so we don't have any background noise. Next, please. So just a little bit about the Zoom. I'm sure everybody's expert in Zoom by now. So there is a little chat box at the end, kind of bottom of the screen, where you can raise a question, typing anything you want to share or questions. Just make sure it's direct to everyone so we all can see it. And then the next one is about raise hands function. Yeah, again, there is I think a raise hand button there for you to just alert you have a question. Although we may not be able to get to you immediately, but we'll try to get to you as quick as possible, but also allowing the speaker to finish their thoughts. Okay, without further ado, just about today's meeting agenda. So I know it's been a little while since we met last time about this project. So we want to start giving you guys an overview about where we are in terms of the overall project schedule, provide a refresher on the alternatives we are analyzing in terms of, but also in terms of the framework and the metrics we're using. But most importantly, we want to hear from you whether these metrics are aligned to expectation, or are there any particular metrics of interest to you? These are the things we definitely want to hear from you. So with that, I'm going to hand over to the project team.
Thanks, Joshine. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yep.
All right, awesome. So I'm just going to do a brief study overview and status because, as Joshine mentioned, it has been a while since we've all been in touch while we've been working on this alternatives analysis. So a little bit of a refresher, the North Bethesda corridor was identified for BRT in the countywide transit corridor functional master plan. Since that time, the county has advanced several BRT projects through development and planning, including Deers Mills Road, MD 355, New Hampshire Avenue, North Bethesda, and US 29 BRT is currently in service. So the map you see on the screen is our original project study area map. So this is what you've seen since we started a little over 2 years ago. Since the project has progressed, it has been confirmed that our western terminus for the North Bethesda Transitway is still the Westfield Montgomery Mall, which was identified in the master plan. And the eastern terminus is the North Bethesda Metro based on our termini screening analysis, which we shared with you in a previous CAC meeting. So this project will also accomplish a few other things, which we'll touch upon tonight. The designated alignment types for the BRT service along this corridor, identifying stop locations, and really just preparing the project to move into the next phase. So many of you on the call tonight have participated in our past CAC meetings and our engagement efforts for this project, which began over 2 years ago in winter of 2022. Since then, we have developed a corridor foundations report outlining existing and proposed future conditions, completed a termini screening, which I just mentioned identified North Bethesda Metro as our eastern terminus, developed our build alternatives analysis, and for the past year, a little bit longer, we've been working through refinements to that alternatives analysis. We anticipate wrapping that up in the next few months, so then we can bring a draft preferred alternative to you all in the fall of this year. So in addition to these technical milestones, we've also had several CAC and TAC meetings, as well as public engagement, including survey, bus stop chats, and then virtual public meetings and in person as well. So as previously stated, we have completed several tasks for the North Bethesda Transitway, including determining that eastern terminus, confirming the alternatives for this study, identifying evaluation metrics and approaches for running those different methodologies, and then running the alternatives analysis. We're going to share some of those with you tonight. We're still making refinements to the ridership analysis for this project. And as we continue to do that and button it up over the next few months, we are working closely with Montgomery County BRT projects such as New Hampshire to ensure that there's consistency with how we're approaching ridership, because this is such an important metric when we're trying to understand different alternatives and implications of those. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Lucas, and he's going to talk through the alternatives and then the results of our alternatives analysis.
All right, thank you, Kate, and good evening, everyone. My name is Lucas Muller with Kimley Horn, and my job tonight is to take you through some of the technical analyses that the team has prepared and try to summarize some of the key takeaways for you related to that. So let's first, we can first start by providing kind of an overview of the alternatives that we are looking at. So when we talk about alternatives, we're really focused on 4 options. And this doesn't mean that we end up with exactly one of these as it's currently being studied. There may be elements of multiple alternatives, but it's important to identify distinct alternatives to analyze so that we understand the different considerations. It also doesn't mean that we are assuming that there will definitely be a build alternative. To that end, we are also including the no build alternative, as well as a TSM or a transportation system management alternative to study as well. And really what that means, TSM, it involves some increased transit service levels. So buses operating more frequently than they do today, but very limited infrastructure investment, whereas the build alternatives involve more of that infrastructure investment. And the 2 build alternatives that we have identified center around different ways to approach that investment in the corridor. So build alternative 1 really focuses on trying to achieve as much of the broader master plan vision as possible, whereas build alternative 2 focuses more on some targeted investment in key locations. So in terms of the infrastructure assumptions for each of these, when we talk about both of these alternatives involve dedicated transit lanes. And one of the key differences here is that build alternative 1, which we'll show you a cross section in just a minute here, is primarily median running. So that means the buses are in the center of the roadway in their own dedicated transit lanes, whereas the dedicated lanes in build alternative 2 are along the curb of the street, so on the side of the street. In alternative 2, there are some additional sections that have mixed flow, so where the bus is operating just within general traffic. In terms of stations, relatively similar amount, but a couple fewer stations in build alternative 2. This is to test out sensitivity to different travel times, and also testing out an extension to the west beyond that, beyond the transit hub at the Montgomery Mall. In terms of intersections, we are looking at transit signal priority, TSP, at certain intersections. This allows the bus to go through the intersection more efficiently. But that's something certainly we'll be looking at along with a more detailed design, such as turn lane length, more specific design during future phases. I should also mention that both alternatives include pedestrian and bicycle facilities, which we'll show you shortly as well. So in terms of the map views of the alternative, let's take a look at these, and I'll point out a couple of differences as we go. So starting from the west, we're looking at alternative 1 right now. So we are starting at the Montgomery Mall Transit Hub and proceeds in dedicated lanes through 3 stops along Rock Spring Drive as Westlake Terrace. Along Old Georgetown Road, there are 3 stations as well, and dedicated lanes continue. So anywhere you see that solid line, that indicates dedicated transit lanes. And then a difference to point out is alternative 1 towards the north serves the future proposed north entrance for the North Bethesda Metro Rail Station and operates in mixed flow, which is that dotted line along Executive Boulevard. So for build alternative 2, starting from the west again, you see that potential extension to the west along Westlake Drive. That serves a relatively high density residential development. And so we wanted to have the different 2 alternatives to compare what that effect that had on ridership as well as travel time to serve that additional destination. You see 1 less station along Westlake Terrace and Rock Spring Drive, and then just 1 station along Old Georgetown Road, located at the new high school. And then in the northern section, we go into mixed traffic along Nicholson and Marinelli Road, serving the existing entrance at the North Bethesda Metro Rail Station. So that's what that looks like at on the map components. And so in terms of the cross sections, we wanted to make clear, we know that when we started this study, it was actually before the protected bike lanes had been installed. So when we talk about the no build conditions here, we are including those protected lanes in the no build conditions. But as you can see from these cross sections, in both of the build alternatives, the bicycle facilities are present, but they're included off street on a side path. So that is one important difference. Another difference, as we've mentioned here, is that the buses, the transit dedicated lanes operating in the median versus the curb running. So that does result in a wider right-of-way or typical section in alternative 1. So that was along Old Georgetown Road. We're looking now at a section along Rock Spring Drive. So this is obviously a more narrow section here. So Rock Spring Drive and fairly similar for nearby Westlake Terrace. Alternative 1 includes a 2-way cycle track off street as well as some on-street parking. This was consistent with the design that was looked at as part of the sector plan. And then alternative 2 does keep that bike facility, but it also has 2 general purpose lanes as well as curb running dedicated transit. So that's an overview of the alternatives that we are looking at. And again, as we look into our analysis, we'll be really looking for if there may be elements from each of those alternatives that we can develop into a preferred alternative. So there's a lot of ways to measure success, and it can vary depending on what is deemed to be important for the corridor. And in previous meetings, we talked to you about the goals and objectives. So we wanted to build our evaluation framework of how we are analyzing the alternatives to be built around these 6 goals of quality service, mobility choices, sustainable solution, community equity, economic growth, and public safety. These have been adopted as goals and objectives for the Flash BRT system. In terms of the specific metrics, the next slide, we're going to be walking through some of the preliminary results for these metrics. And you can see here how these various metrics that we're going to be going to align with our various study goals. All right, so now we'll start going through some of the results from those metrics. And as Joshie mentioned in the beginning, we really want to, as you digest this information and try to take some of the key findings away, thinking about if there are things that seem to resonate or things that surprise you, or things that you have questions about. There's a lot of detailed analysis that went into this, and we're trying to summarize at a high level. So there certainly may be things that you have questions about that would ultimately be documented in the report, and we can do our best to try to answer those questions this evening. So let's first start with travel shed. What in travel shed essentially is how far can you travel based on the available transit and multimodal options within a certain time frame. So when we look into the future, we certainly want to be able to get a further distance and access more questions and more people and jobs in those different travel sheds. So this graph here showing how many people and jobs can be reached in a 60-minute travel shed during the weekday peak. And in all scenarios, unsurprising as we think about the growth that's planned in this region, in all scenarios, there is an increase of the number of people and jobs you can access within a 60-minute trip based on future projected growth. However, build alternative 1 and 2 with their increased frequency as well as the dedicated lanes, which speed up that travel time, allow for a more substantial increase. So approximately 204,000 more people and about 175,000 more jobs accessible within that 60-minute travel shed. So to dig into that a little bit deeper and to look at a deeper dive into the individual station. So what you see here, we've identified 5 sets of station locations that we are going to look at in a little bit more detail. And each alternative had different station assumptions for which stations were included. But really the purpose of this analysis of looking at these station clusters is to really answer questions like, should 1 or more of these stations within the grouping be included in the preferred alternative? Is there one better than the other? Do we need both? Do we need all 3? What are the trade-offs between them? So again, we're not at the point yet where we're saying this is exactly what we recommend in the preferred alternative, but we're going to share some initial takeaways for these different station pairs. So the first is on the western section. So looking at the Montgomery Mall Transit Hub, as well as that extension to Westlake Drive. And the station at the transit hub, that's always been from the start of this the identified terminus. And so we're fairly confident that there will be a station at this location regardless to make sure that there is transfers to other locations. But we want to test out what the extension what would provide going to the west. And so what we saw from the analysis is that, especially with the planned redevelopment, you do get more future population and jobs within a reach of the transit hub, but providing that extension to Westlake Drive does provide closer connection to the residential there. That does include some lower income, relative to the rest of the study area. And so that's certainly a consideration that we want to look at going forward. For the second grouping of stations, this is really along Westlake Terrace and Rock Spring Drive here. If you're familiar with this area, right now, a lot of it is suburban-like office, but you all may also be familiar with some of the ongoing and planned development in this area, really planned for some high increases in density. That's why we were looking at not only existing, but really focusing on future population and jobs. And so that station that's shown in blue, the middle station, did score the best in terms of reaching all three of these categories. That may be due to its central location within the plan development. But this is a scenario where likely we wouldn't, in our preferred alternative, likely we wouldn't have all three of these stations due to their proximity to each other. And so trying to balance trade-offs and access between the three stations. The third grouping is along Old Georgetown Road. So again, there is a station that's planned and was planned in the master plan to be adjacent to the high school. And so that certainly would be the best connection for students and for those going to the school. However, based on our spatial analysis, which likely captured some of the population and job growth that's actually south of the interstate there, the Tuckerman Lane stop did show a higher access to future population and jobs. That doesn't mean that we would be removing the high school station. We want to factor that Tuckerman Lane station in, and we may need to even look back at that previous pair to understand how that station could align with that additional grouping along Rock Spring. As we get to the northern section, this is another area where our perception based on what's out there existing may be a little bit different than what's forecast in the future. So right now, I'm sure most are familiar with the Pike and Rose. The Pike and Rose development, the northern station there, which is on the corner of where a lot of that development is today, certainly would be the closest connection to that area. But also looking at the more southern point, the one that's labeled as Wall Local Park, looking at some of the plans in the master plan, some of the future core development is located close to that area, as well as some of the additional developments that are along Rockville Pike as well. So depending on which alignment is chosen, both of these stations are among the highest in terms of potential ridership and access to populations here. And then finally, accessing the Metro Rail station. Obviously, this is an important transfer point, both to the Red Line as well as the Rockville Pike planned BRT along MD 355. As well as potential future BRT connections, such as the Randolph Road Bus Rapid Transit Service. So again, different trade-offs here. That northern section does align a bit more with the planned station on Rockville Pike, but certainly dependent on future development and changes and the implementation of that north entrance. Which is currently planned, but not a specific plan yet. So a lot of different considerations, for the stations, especially at these endpoints, understanding where the bus could turn around, which connections it can have, and transfers to other service. And so as we move on, going on the infrastructure front, we are at the very initial stages of this conceptual layout, and to really get a very preliminary understanding of what potential impacts there could be in terms of a right-of-way perspective. We've taken those typical cross sections that you saw earlier in the presentation and compared that with the existing right-of-way. And so if you remember those cross sections, alternative one had a fairly significant more width in their cross section. So we do see an increase in the potential impacted area for that wider cross section, especially along Old Georgetown Road. Again, this is preliminary information. As we do more detailed design, we'd certainly strive to limit property impacts where that would be, where that could be a potential. These are both, again, shown for the build alternative. For the TSM alternative, would likely be very minimal, if any, impacts to right-of-way, potentially just at locations where there were planned stations to be able to construct that. And now getting into some of the cost and financial information. So this first one focuses more on the infrastructure investment. You might be referred to this as the capital cost. So these high-level opinions of probable costs were prepared, again, based on really looking at those typical sections and really trying to get comparison, order of magnitude comparisons here. This does include costs for infrastructure for the transit, as well as vehicles, the buses to operate those services, pedestrian and bicycle facilities, stations, technology, things like professional services, as well as quite a large contingency at this point, given some of the unknown factors. So you see here, very significant differences between the TSM and the build alternative. Alternative 1 does come in higher than alternative 2, based on, again, potential right-of-way costs, additional roadway width in that in the cross section. But certainly looking to refine those in future phases and looking for ways to decrease those costs. So that's the capital. On the operation side, so capital, we like to think of one-time costs, operational, or the annual cost to run the service. So the cost of paying operators, fuel, vehicle maintenance, et cetera. Those are costs that are based into here. And so do see slightly lower annual cost for the TSM alternative. That really is due to the difference in headways in the peak period. So you can see the peak period for the TSM was assumed to be 15-minute service, but in the build alternatives, we've increased that to 7.5-minute frequencies, which do have the higher cost, more buses needed to operate that service. There's not much of a difference between, there's not much of a difference between alternative 1 and alternative 2, just relative due to the similar frequencies and route length. There are a couple different nuances, but they tend to really kind of balance out at this stage of planning. The next metric which we looked at is potential impacts to environmental resources. We always want to be conscious of the various resources that are located along and near to the corridor. So you see the list in green there of the potential resources. And this is really in advance of the more detailed environmental screening that would need to happen as part of the NEPA process and the future phases. Again, we use those typical sections and kind of created a buffer around the corridor. Again, relatively similar resources that are potentially along the corridor here. But again, we'll be working in future phases to avoid impacts and making sure that we are proceeding appropriately with the design. Okay, so now we'll get into a bit of the traffic analysis, and there's a few different kind of key messages that we want you to take away from our traffic analysis here. And the first is we performed a lot of analyses here, and really what the first thing to know is even without adding any of the transit projects or any of the build alternatives or changing the transit service, there is projected to be a fairly significant increase in travel time along the corridor And that's really just due to the regional and local growth that's happening, as well as the planned development. And so as we compare, with this chart is showing the average, the transit travel time, so kind of an out and back round trip, going from one end of the corridor at the mall to the North Bethesda Metro. Looking at an increase from anywhere from 20% in the AM peak up to 55% in the PM peak, resulting in a potential future travel. So if we weren't to do anything from a transit infrastructure or service perspective, this is what might be expected for buses along this corridor. So we want to keep that in mind as we talk about the impacts for the corridor or for the related to the transit service. So this is a map view of that similar information. So really comparing existing and no build. So anywhere you see those dark orange circles, that is where an intersection in the no build is operating at what we call level of service E or F. A lot of congestion in that area, especially along Old Georgetown Road. And so again, this is assessing future conditions, looking at potential 2045. Certainly a lot can change from now to 2045, but based on available data and projected growth, this is what we are seeing. And so all of that to this point has been about that existing to no build. So what we want to understand now is if we were to add some of that transit infrastructure, how would that further change the condition? So you see, this is showing the number of intersections along different segments of the corridor that are operating at level of service E or F. So you do see an increase in build alternative 1. So along Westlake Terrace, 2 intersections going from below E, which is better, to E or F. And then along Rock Spring Drive, that intersection at Rock Spring Drive and Old Georgetown Road, it was already failing in the no build, but it does get significantly worse. So we wanted to highlight that as well. Throughout both alternatives, even though there's not a change in the number of intersections, there are some increases in delay, with the one exception of one of the intersections along build alternative 2. So there's a lot of information there for the traffic, but to summarize kind of the key takeaways again from existing conditions to no build, the analysis is showing significantly increased congestion. Both of the build alternatives would incrementally make vehicle congestion worse than that no build, but we saw some of those targeted locations where that would be most felt. Alternative 2 general purpose lanes operate better in comparison to alternative 1, and the primary reason for that is to some of these important traffic factors that we must have to consider as we move forward to detailed design. So if you remember alternative 1 in the center running, so anytime there's a left turn across those dedicated lanes, we would need for safety purposes and operational purposes, you would need that dedicated green arrow for the turn, which can cause some additional delay, as well as signal timing for buses to enter and exit those dedicated lanes. For the curb running, you generally have less impact to traffic operation, but there are certain things to consider, like transitioning. If the bus needs to make a left, how does it get from the curb to the left turn lane, as well as if vehicles are coming into the curb lane to try to make a right, how does that interaction play out? So that kind of summarizes that. And then in terms of related metric, transit travel time, of course, this is very closely tied in with the traffic analysis. But really here you can see some of the savings that those dedicated lanes bring to the build alternative. So again, this is a round trip transit travel time. And so we're looking for the no build around 40 minutes back and forth due to that traffic, the increased traffic congestion. Whereas the build alternatives in that dedicated lane can really make that trip similar, if not better, than their trip from the existing conditions that we have currently. And so that kind of summarizes where our analysis to date. It recognizes that that's a lot of information to try to digest, but we wanted to share that with you again to get your reactions as we move forward to developing that preferred alternative. So happy to answer any questions, but first I'll let Kate just summarize where our next steps go from here.
Yeah, thanks, Lucas, for going through all of that. So our plan is we'll be meeting again with you all for the CAC in the fall. So we'll have those ridership results completed by then, a draft preferred alternative based on the alternatives analysis that we've presented to you, the ridership results, and any feedback that we do receive today. We'll also have some more additional public engagement that will occur while that preferred alternative is still draft to get feedback just from the general public, though we know that they can attend the CAC meetings as well. And with that, as Lucas says, we do appreciate you all participating tonight, and we've got time to answer any questions. And I know that we have gotten a few questions within the chat. So Joshine is going to read through those and we can start to answer them.
Yeah, I think, yeah, thank you, Lucas and Kate, for going through the analysis results and presentation. And thank you everyone for being patient. We definitely were not ignoring your questions, but rather I see they are getting into a flow. So I want to get through the material first, then go the Q&A. So I'll try my best to go back to the top of the chat. So I will repeat a question in the chat box, but for anyone who wishes to speak up, I think raise your hand and I'll go to you next. So we can kind of follow the order. So back into the very top, I think the first question came from Theodore Levine. May mispronounce your name. My apology if I did. So your question was, does dedicated lane mean the median, not curb? So it means both actually. It means either median running BRT lane or curb running. So. And then the next question is from Peter James about, is this project utilizing federal funds? So right now it's still early to talk about funding, but for any major investment the county is doing for BRT, it will require multiple sources of funding, including federal funds. That's actually the plan for some other corridors that's more advanced, like Veers Mill Road. But for this project, we haven't got to that point yet, but it certainly could be one of the options. And I think just tag on to this question, I know I'm looking back, I see Krista also had a question about funding, whether Old Georgetown Road is a state road, as state funds are being used. So that's, again, the ideas will be requiring multiple sources of funding. So it's very likely state fund will be used as well.
Yeah, and Josh, I'll just add to that in terms of the federal funding component. You know, so much of that there's a substantial process to get approved for federal funding, and a lot of these analyses that we're doing and summarizing right now are intentionally in line with the types of things that need to be included in that federal grant application. So trying to make sure that the project that we develop can be viable for those funds.
Yeah, good point, Lucas. Okay, keep going down the list. This question came from Bart G. Sorry, I can't pronounce your last name again, my apology. So your question was, where are you planning to get the land to build 2 dedicated lanes on Old Georgetown? There does not appear to be any room. I'll defer this question to Lucas and now Kate.
Yeah, I can. So the preliminary assumption here, going back to the cross sections, Kate, maybe you can go to that slide on the Old Georgetown Road cross section slide. But the no build scenario does include those protected bike lanes that are there. There are, as you can see here, there is an increased right of way width. So as part of the current assumption, there may be some areas that could impact right of way there. But again, the bike facilities would, under this alternative, be planned to be relocated to the side path, which was consistent with the Montgomery County master plan. So the amount of general purpose lanes is staying the same. We're not proposing to go down to 1 general purpose lane. It's staying at 2, but there may be potential right of way impact if that was the alternative that moved forward.
Okay, so yeah, there is actually a second half of Bart's question is I guess I assume you meant Old Georgetown Road is already a mess, and when Woodward opens, it will be even worse. Lucas, you want to continue responding to this one?
Yeah, I mean that's definitely the area that we were talking about, and we did like we were saying in the traffic analysis, we did see that there is congestion that's forecasted in that future no build. But again, the proposal for all these cross sections along Old Georgetown Road is maintaining those 2 general purpose lanes, but not reducing that number.
Okay, going down the list, this question came from Daniel Melnick. How can people who live along the route express views regarding these alternatives? So obviously, we appreciate you guys joining us today and asking questions, and then also express your opinion on these alternatives and the analysis. So that's certainly one way to get engaged, but that's not the only way. And later on, we'll be putting this information on the website, including the recording. So yeah, you can always reach out to the county and express your view about these alternatives and analysis. And as Kate mentioned, there will be another opportunity in the fall to engage with the group about, based on what we hear from you, the draft kind of recommended alternative we'll be selecting. So, okay, keep going. Let's see, the next one again came from Bart. So you asked, this may be discussed kind of later on in the presentation, which side of Tuckman Lane is the station being proposed, on the north or south?
So at this point, we haven't gotten into that level of detail of specific design of stations. We've generally just identified the intersection at which it would be located. So that's another opportunity if you do have thoughts or suggestions or concerns. That could be something to provide feedback on as we get into more detailed design.
Okay, I think Barty were also asking, there may be 2 using the lanes on the curb. Yeah, so as Lucas already mentioned, yeah, the specific siting of the location stations is yet to be determined. But if it's curb running, then obviously there will be a pair of stations on either side of the curb. And if the center station, then again, there will be a pair of them. The exact location relative to the intersection or mid-block will be determined further through the project. Okay, so next question. Let's see. Okay, I think this is the same question from Daniel. Where is Tuckman Lane stop planned? Stations are very close to each other, so what is the advantage of having two stations?
Yeah, I can speak to that. So, when we were going through, and maybe Kate, if you want to go to that, this slide shows that pair. We aren't for this, yeah, that one. For this one, we're not necessarily proposing that there would be a station at both of these. So in all of the alternatives that we looked at, there was a station at the high school, but Tuckerman Lane was an option that we tested in alternative one as well. So you make a good point about the spacing. It's very close together, and so we also might want to look at how the stations end up on Rock Spring as well to understand if there needs to be a station close to Tuckerman.
Okay. Alrighty, keep going. So this question came from Susan. How often would the bus run? Some current bus routes have buses that run every 40 minutes, which is not convenient.
So the current what we call the service plan would be a minimum of 15-minute frequencies all day or better. And in the peak periods, the build alternatives were assumed to go at 7.5 minutes, which is a really substantial frequency. That's certainly to the point where you don't need to be looking at a schedule, and you don't need to be worried about going. You go, and at most you have to wait 7 minutes for the bus to come. So that's definitely one of the most critical elements of BRT service is providing that frequent all-day connection.
Okay, next question came from Karen G. So reducing the number of transfers required for a trip can significantly reduce travel time. So to increase access to jobs, has any thought been given to a single BRT route running from the Eastern County through North Bethesda to Westfield, Montgomery, Suburban Hospital and the Medical Center, or downtown Bethesda? At the eastern end, it might connect up with one of the other BRT routes rather than terminating in North Bethesda. So I'll take a first stab, and Lucas, feel free to chime in. So this project is part of the expansive BRT network the county is planning and developing right now. So obviously to the east, there is the Randolph Road BRT corridor that's in the pipeline under planning. So this brings up a good point in terms of obviously what we are studying here is the independent utility of the different alternatives within the termini of the North Bethesda Transitway, but also there is a scenario potentially could increase ridership by, like you suggested, by running this service longer or connecting with other BRT network. I guess the idea is to finding a seamless transfer without wasting too much time. So yeah, that's definitely a good suggestion. Lucas, anything you want to add?
Yeah, and that's actually one of the things that we are looking at as we refine the ridership analysis and look at different permutation. Not the exact alignment that you were sharing, but different tests of how we can connect in with other lines and what effect that has on ridership.
Okay, so next question also came from Karen G. How much additional time would actually be saved by a dedicated lane or timed traffic lights? The Ride on 26 route from North Bethesda to Westfield, Montgomery is already a short trip, about 15 minutes during rush hour. Increasing frequency of the existing route would reduce wait time for passengers, saving them time from door to door. Lucas, you want to take this on?
Yeah, and Kate, can you go to the transit travel time slide. So this is, you're right on. Right now, if you went out there and took the ride on 26, there's not much congestion. And it is about kind of a, like you said, that a relatively short trip. But in the future, based on the projected or the potential congestion, if the bus is subject to the same congestion that the general purpose lanes we're seeing a fairly significant increase. So this is showing what our forecasts are saying for the PM peak round trip runtime. So it's going from the mall to North Bethesda back to the mall. And so we're seeing about a 15-minute savings compared, again, round trip compared to the general purpose in the future.
Okay, so next question came from Crystal Southern. What does a station look like or constitute? There are homes along these roads. Are these homeowners now going to have a lookout and see stations in front of their homes? I'll try to take a first step. So the BRT station would consist of features just like other bus stop you see, shelter, bench, amenity, but more distinct feeling of the BRT branding. So as some of you may be aware of the US 29 Flash BRT that's already being serviced for a few years. So that's one prototype of the station, but doesn't mean that that will be the station for this corridor. So we're very early in the planning stage. So we definitely acknowledge your comment here in terms of the siting of the station and the potential kind of visual effect for homeowners. So those things will be taken into consideration during the environmental process and the later design. Lucas, anything you want to add?
I think you covered it. There's definitely different scales of what a station could look like.
Okay. Okay, also, this is the second half of Crystal's question. Other than this being part of the old master plan, what problem is this trying to solve?
I can
go ahead.
For that. I mean, it's an interesting question, and one of the things and the kind of common themes that we see in our analysis is that we have to remember that we're planning for the future right here, especially with this corridor. What the corridor is projected to look like in the future looks a lot different than what it does look like today. We talked about the suburban office type land uses along Rock Spring and Westlake. The Pike and Rose development obviously has started, but a lot more development is proposed in that area. And so, we may look out our windows today and not see very much congestion or not see as much density. But it's important we're proactively thinking about the future, as a lot of these developments are already approved and in process. And so, we don't want to get to the point where we have that and we haven't thought about what the mobility options are. So, as we get further in this process, will be important to think about implementation time frame. We're not saying that there's going to be a BRT tomorrow or next year here. And so trying to understand what would be the appropriate time frame for implementation of the preferred alternative.
And Lucas, I think you just answered the question. I guess the next question from Daniel Melnick, when do you expect this to happen? So I know your hands are also up. I'll get to you soon, Daniel. Really appreciate your patience. And if that wasn't sufficient to your question, that we can follow up. Just want to go down the list, and there's just a few left. Then we can go to the hands. So question came from Krista Southern. What are build 1 and 2 again? Okay, now we're gonna do another presentation for 30 minutes. So anyway, yeah, Lucas, you want to just really quickly, again, just highlight the distinct features of build 1 and 2, maybe for folks who maybe joined a little late?
Yeah, definitely. Let's go to the next slide there that has the infrastructure assumptions here, and then maybe we can briefly touch on the maps. But so this is the different build alternative, the infrastructure assumptions here. The main difference is the median running, so the dedicated lanes are in the middle of the street for alternative 1, and then curb running on the sides of the streets for alternative 2. Alternative 2 has a couple fewer stations along the alignment, and generally a less narrow right-of-way width. So that's kind of the infrastructure assumptions, and then maybe we can briefly just talk about the maps. They both have very similar alignments with a couple exceptions. Is that the northern section here, alternative 1 goes to the proposed north entrance at North Bethesda Metro, and the alternative 2 has a small western extension along Westlake Drive, and then on the eastern side serves to the North Bethesda, the current entrance for the North Bethesda Metro Rail station.
Okay. Let me see. Go down the list. Okay. I know there are a few questions that kind of pop up in the chat. Those may be later than, I know the hands for Peter and Daniel have been up for very long, so I would give the floor to Peter first. And then I'm going to go back to I think there are maybe 5 or 6 remaining questions in the chat box. So yeah, go ahead, Peter, you want to unmute yourself.
Hi, yeah, Peter Katz. So knowing that the area is predominantly single-family homes with the occasional mid-rise and high-rise building, and the fact that you're not going to have large parking lots for people to park before they get on this, the catchment that you get from a walking distance of about 5 minutes, the quarter mile, is going to be very limited. So the presumption is that a lot of your riders are coming from other existing buses or transit, the Red Line. And what mystifies me is that I don't see any other bus or transit lines shown in your presentation. And I don't know if there are seamless connections or intermodal connections. You know, you say service planning's coming, but that's really key. So I really want to pick up on Karen G's question. You know, I need to understand the context of this as not just an isolated corridor, but as part of a network. You know, Montgomery's fortunate for suburban areas to have a reasonably dense thicket of bus lines. And I don't see a single one of the stations marked with which bus lines are also common to that station, how they're going to be fed. So to my mind, the presentation tonight is completely void. I mean, how can we evaluate this? Where did you get your numbers for ridership without looking at how people are getting there? I'm staggered by that omission. That's one comment. I have another one, but if you could respond to that.
Sure, I can take that. So there are a couple things to hit on there. I think so. One, I think in terms of showing the connections to other routes, I think that's a great point. It's something that we certainly are considering, and I think should show more clearly in the presentation. I do want to make the important point here that tonight we are not sharing ridership numbers because that's something we're still working on and refining. And one of the things that the reason why we are still working on it has to do with exactly that, of playing around with different permutations of how this service could be connected to a broader network. So for example, we're looking at, instead of stopping at the Montgomery Mall, looking at what if you continued and linked service with the bus service that's planned to go to Tyson's to connect to Virginia, and or connecting with the proposed Randolph Road BRT that starts it starts just north of the North Bethesda Metro Rail. The BRT, there is a BRT line also planned for Rockville Pike. So those certainly are being considered and are going into our ridership model. I can assure you that. I think for future presentations, that's a good reminder that we need to be more explicit about showing those connections.
But are you expecting to make decisions after tonight about where the stops are located, or is this just a kind of an early draft?
No, right now we're just showing what our preliminary findings are, and there will be future opportunities to look at those ridership results and understand what that means for a potential.
So how many bus lines converge at the Montgomery Mall at that transit center?
I don't know the number exactly, but I know that there are multiple ones that are existing, and there's also there's a planned future connection to Tyson's as well.
And how many at Tuckerman? Probably 0 right now. Or maybe there's a bus that crosses. I mean, I'm just staggered by that lack of context. And, again, we're not talking about a system fed by cars and parking, and the density is not enough to generate significant ridership from the walk shed. So really, the whole game is other transportation modes, buses and the metro. So again, I think your number one contributing data point is completely missing here. Let me hit my other comment. So you have an evaluation of different populations that might be patronizing these stops with a focus on whether they're I forget the term you had there, equity population, which is a strange term. Yet when you evaluate the school, there's nothing in the boxes. You're not really looking at the full, it's not just about where people live. That's one end of a journey. There are journeys to workplaces and to schools. And again, it just seems like you're taking a very one-dimensional view of the usage of the system. And, it's about people's whole lives, not just about what their address is and what their income level is. So again, I think there's just a huge omission. I'm just really questioning your methodology here. So I don't know if I just want to see more in the way of information about people's complete lives, not just their residences.
Yeah, Peter, your comment is definitely acknowledged. I think in the next opportunity for engaging with the CAC, when we are kind of sharing the ridership analysis, we can definitely highlight more about how the different service intertwine and fed to this corridor. But as a fact, there are 6 ride-on routes overlapping on this corridor at a given time or location. So those are actually all fed into the model. Yeah, but right now today we are focusing on the overall kind of the alternative. Yeah.
Will it be a seamless transfer, or will there be intermodal where you have to pay a new fare? I mean, intermodal, you lose about 40% of your ridership when people cross from one system to another.
Yeah, at some point there will be transfer. Because
but I mean, is that do we know yet whether which of the two, intermodal or seamless?
I mean, some of that may depend on just a larger regional policy, right? I mean, this is Montgomery County service and the whether depending on the mode that you're transferring in the operator.
What's happening on 29? Is that a separate fare? If you ride a local bus over to the route on the 29, do you have a transfer of some kind, or is it a free transfer, or you pay a new fare?
Dan, is that something you know of? I'm just putting you on the spot.
I don't know the answer. I don't know the answer to that, but we can certainly pick it up.
Yeah, we can certainly get back to you, Peter. Yeah, at the end of my slide, there's my contact information, and if you send me a note, but also I can also reach back to you as well. Kind of
these are big questions.
Yeah,
it's just this is the kind of thing we should be looking at this point. You can't just, it's got a huge impact on ridership. So, and we've got a system already up and running. Anyway, whatever. Thank you.
Okay. So I know, Daniel, you've been waiting, so please unmute yourself. Yeah, thank you for your patience.
Okay, thank you very much. This has been a very interesting presentation. I have a couple of questions for you. I really want to stress that the people who live near where this is going to be built at some point in the future feel very strongly that we need to be directly involved in making some of these decisions, because they're going to affect our lives. They're going to affect our houses. They're going to affect us in a very direct way. Along those lines, there are 2 points that really need to be considered in your future process. One of them is that it is very important that there be a clear statement of the timeline. It's one thing to say that certain things are going to happen in the future. Is that future 1 year away, 7 years away, 20 years away? Your statement today does not address that at all, and it needs to be addressed. And the reason why it needs to be addressed is because it informs the reaction of actual real people who live next to where you are proposing to build these alternatives. The second point I would make is that you need a process that directly involves the residents, the people whose houses are going to be directly impacted as you increase the size of the road, so that you can work with them to come up with a solution that is going to be best for them in terms of the design, so that the design has the minimum possible effect on their houses, on their lives, on the way they live. We saw the construction of this new high school. It's an excellent high school. I've looked at it. It's really very pretty. But it was the process of working to establish that high school did not adequately interact with and involve the people who live right next to it. And I think you need to be aware that unless you have a process that directly works with people, you're going to alienate a lot of people, and there's going to be a lot of bad feelings. So as a result of that, I would just urge you, number one, to have a clear statement of how far out this is that will tend to have an impact on the way people react. And number two, have a process that's much more open to involve the people living along the route, who can express their views and who you could work with to try to come up with a solution that's going to receive acceptance rather than opposition.
Yeah, Daniel, thank you for your comments, and the suggestion will definitely take both counts into consideration, yeah, for future engagement. Okay, I think just while we were just having people speak up, maybe I'll just finish these two hands here. Peter James, I think you are next. Can you unmute yourself and speak your questions? See if I can mute you.
Okay. Yeah,
Okay.
I got finally pop up. Yeah, I've been going over with some of the other on some of the other BRT projects, trying to get what's called PRT, or autonomous guideways, included in the study, especially if you're going to seek federal funds. These are being put in Northern California. I think one just finished being built for this 6 mile run for the second largest airport in China. There's been one in Heathrow Airport. But these are little, and I would propose using these e-trikes, which are showing up all over Europe. Maryland has a delivery delivery device law, and these things could be delivered to people's homes. I'm 68 years old, and even though I'm about 20 minutes from 355, but walking down there, it has so many advantages over BRT, and it's like the story of, if all you have is a hammer, everything starts to look like a nail. And I think it would, be better serve the public if, all viable alternatives. And certainly, I'm going to show up in court if the county goes and seeks, federal funds, under the NEPA laws. So I'm just hoping that someone will see what's going on. Bill Gates actually funded the company that's putting them out in Northern California. So this is a real thing, and they run on guideways above traffic, so they have no interaction with traffic. The only one in the U.S. I know of has been ran for 48 years. They just shut it, reached its end of life, but it hadn't had a single crash in 48 years. So what does it take to get you guys to study alternative forms of transportation? And we're coming into a world of autonomous vehicles, and by the time these things get built, even just standard, several cities like Phoenix and LA and San Francisco are now deploying autonomous vehicles. So but these things are autonomous. They ride on their own guideways, and like I said, you can order them like an Uber and they show up at your door, and when you go home you can leave them, and they'll find their way back to the guideway using the state of Maryland has a delivery robot
Yep.
law.
Yeah, thank you, Peter, for your suggestion. Yeah, if when this project advances, I mean, we'll certainly consider viable alternative for comparing on comparison purpose. Karen, you are next. Can you unmute yourself?
Great, thank you. Hi, I'm Karen Bolte with the Wildwood Manor Citizens Association. Our community is right behind the Wildwood Shopping Center, so we are right behind the intersection of Old Georgetown and Democracy, and Old Georgetown and Rock Spring. And I think I'd like to, I want to take more time to digest the study results, since obviously this is the first time we're seeing them. But I wanted to reiterate a couple of the comments that I think people have already brought up, is that it's really hard to believe that you're already doing an analysis without having the full ridership data. Especially, I think that you said that the two build alternatives, alternative 1 and 2, have a 15-minute savings peak PM round trip, meaning round trip between Montgomery Mall and the North Bethesda metro station. But people are not going round trip between Montgomery Mall and North Bethesda, during the peak PM time. They're probably going, one way in the morning and one way in the afternoon. So that might not really be, like what should be evaluated. And then I really think that what others have said, that you already have an existing ride-on bus system that goes from both North Bethesda as well as the Grosvenor Metro Station to Montgomery Mall down. I am familiar with the 96, which goes down Tuckerman and Old Georgetown and Rock Spring to Montgomery Mall. And I think the reason more people don't take those bus lines are because they don't run frequently enough. So this whole problem could be solved by increasing the frequency of your current ride-on routes. And you said that there are 6 ride-on routes that overlap this particular corridor. So I would really, encourage you that when you're talking about $100 million build alternatives, where you already have an existing bus system that people can take, it's as well as the real concern about taking away property because you need more right of way to build this. And the other thing that your analysis did find is also an increase in vehicular congestion, because we already got slapped with, in peak PM northbound, 35% increase in travel time, vehicular travel time, because of the addition of the bike lanes and the resulting, 1/3 reduction of the road. That's a big consideration. So I think that the next, as you're considering, the no build alternatives versus these other alternatives, you may be able to address the mobility issues by using the current transportation network and just improving what we already have.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah. Thank you, Karen, for the comments.
And Joshua, can I take a moment? I think there's a lot of comments and good questions, both verbally and in the chat, to that point of, how can we build on what we have, especially in the short term, before this other, before there's more development. And I did want to highlight just a couple of things. One is the alternatives that we are looking at. Certainly the build alternatives are easiest to picture because there's infrastructure changes. But again, we are not at the point where we have picked an alternative or have even said that there absolutely will be a build alternative. And so the TSM alternative, the transportation system management, is essentially what a lot of people are saying. And that may be something, that we would like to hear from folks, if that's something that you think is the best option here, especially in the shorter term. And that really what that does is it increases that existing service, the frequency of that service, to a 15-minute service without physical infrastructure. So, the trade-off is you don't get the transit travel time savings from the dedicated lanes, but it's certainly a lower cost and lower investment, both of infrastructure and cost, that is still on the table. So if that's something that you personally feel is important, please voice that. And then finally, just related to the existing service, a couple of people mentioned the Route 26 that does overlap with a lot of this alignment. So we would not be proposing to run both of those services on top of each other. Essentially, for the build alternatives, the BRT would essentially replace the 26, and it would get cut short of the study area. So I think that hopefully that got at some of the questions and comments related to, what can we do that doesn't involve a large infrastructure investment.
Yep. Yeah. Good point, Lucas. Yeah. These are the exact kind of feedback we want here, and would certainly document them in the meeting summary, and as part of input for our kind of next selection process in the planning phase. Okay, I think that's all the hands. If we can just stay on for a few more minutes, and then let me go through the remainder question on the chat box, and then we'll be off running for the evening. So I think picking where I left, the next one is from Crystal Southern. So your question was, where is the analysis on impact to homeowners? Again, Lucas mentioned right now we're at a very high level, probably 10,000 foot level, to look at more for the comparison purpose between different alternatives. And with that cross section Lucas showed earlier, the width of the street, and we did some calculation about the kind of the acreage of impact potential on the parcels. So those are high level, and as project advance, MCDOT will definitely do everything to minimize the impact to homeowners. Okay, so next question, let me see. Karen G, are any of the options better for emergency response? Lucas, you want to take on this one?
Yeah, that's a good question. It wasn't an explicit metric that we analyzed. Certainly when you start talking about physical separation, a median from the dedicated lanes to the general purpose lanes, that can be a consideration. A couple of the I believe elsewhere around the country, there are also permutations that allow emergency vehicles to use dedicated transit lanes. I'm not 100% on that, but I believe I've seen that elsewhere. So, if a bus is, or, even if a bus is there, it may give an opportunity for emergency vehicles to go in those lanes as well.
Okay, so next question from Peter James. Okay, Peter, you already mentioned this question, so I'm gonna just skip this one about the e-trikes, and we'll definitely document your comment here. Okay, again from Karen G. Is there any active planning for BRT between Montgomery County and Tysons, or is that just for future consideration? Lucas, I think you can answer this one.
Yeah, so I can't speak to the exact latest, but I do know that Fairfax County and Montgomery County have been working together to identify bus service in general between Tysons and Montgomery County. A lot of what that bus service could look like depends on what is ultimately decided about related to the express lanes on I-495, which would certainly provide some significant time savings. So there is active planning for bus service between those areas. I don't know exactly what the latest. Okay,
I think this is a follow-up response from Crystal Sazin. I think it may be referring to one of the responses we provided, and you mentioned that you don't quite understand the response. Are you saying you're going to take land from our community to widen the lane? Certainly, that's not the intention. So again, as we mentioned, we are still at a very early of the stage. We want to hear feedback from you guys in terms of how these analysis align with the expectation, how you feel about each alternative. Then we'll take into consideration, and then there's still a lot to do with the engineering. So definitely the MCDOT will do everything to minimize impact on the community. Okay. Next one from Bart. Is there an alternative option where a station is placed at Woodward and not at Tuckerman Lane?
Yes, that's certainly an option that's on the table.
Okay. Next one from Karen G. Would it be possible to move the protected bike lanes to the median that would protect cyclists from traffic turning across the bike lanes? So I can speak on a high level. I think the goal of this project is to maintain a viable bike path facility in addition to high quality transit. But what form it will take, that's yet to be determined. So I can't really answer directly where we can move the bike lane. It's also a state road. Okay, so let's see. I think Peter James, I think this is a similar question about the e-trikes. So I'm gonna skip this one. And Karen, I think the next one you maybe this may be just another paste in the chat. So we've already talked about transfers and how this corridor could connect with other BRT network. Okay, the additional travel time is, we'll also talk about that. Okay, the next question from Molly. Why not run a bus for the TSM alternative every 7.5 minutes during peak times, like for the build alternative? The chart showed 15 minutes for TSM.
Yeah, that's a good question. It was based on what our the 15-minute was the assumption that we used for this round of analysis. That's something certainly that could get tested and refined moving forward to see what the implications for that would be.
Yep. Okay, next question from Bart. The reason the ride times are increasing now and in the future is because the state added completely useless bike lanes to Old Georgetown. If you were able to remove those, that would solve the problem way more easily. Please mention this, but I don't know if there is any chance of happening. So again, I speak earlier. The goal of this project is to maintain a viable bike path options, and then we'll certainly explore what kind of form this will take in the future. So another question from Karen. I wonder whether fewer stations would increase walk time, which might actually increase total travel time for those who live along the route. Lucas, you want to take on this one?
Yeah, that's a good point. It's certainly always a station location and station spacing is always a tricky trade-off. I think everyone would like to have a stop. You know, everyone who's using the bus would like to have a stop right outside their house or their destination. But there's a balance between access and total travel time, like you said, of making sure that the bus has an efficient travel time and it's hitting key destinations. Something we often see as a challenge with transit planning of how much should a bus deviate from the main road to potentially serve a destination. You know, how does that closer access to the destination compare with the travel time differences? So you're right on that there's a trade-off between overall travel time and stop spacing.
Okay, thank you, Lucas. So next question from Theodore, where can I get the roadway cross-section drawing for Old Georgetown Road? I see Kate already posted that on the chat, and then all the information, the slides and recording will be posted online after this meeting. Okay, next question from Crystal. I think Lucas, I think you were talking about you're right. You've written 26 and 96, and then you were asking whether BRT would replace the current service. I think Lucas, you already kind of spoke to that question. I think next one, Crystal, it's the same question. Hopefully, my response somewhat alleviate your concerns. Okay, I think these are next. Just I think folks are just chatting. Okay, I think we have cycled through all of the questions. Let me see if I missed anything here. Maybe this one from, again, I'm CHIDRA. I won't try to pronounce. I think your point is I use the bike lanes, but I have thought of it being a dedicated bus lane instead of a shared lane. Yeah, right now the bike lane on Old Georgetown is for bike only. Okay, next question is from Silvana Valencia. What's the preferred format for the feedback? Do you have a deadline? No, we don't really have proposed a deadline. So yeah, you have my contact information here. So anytime you can provide feedback. But this is the opportunity for the CAC to engage with the team and provide input to the project process. Okay, I think this is the last one from 3 minutes ago. Daniel, the problem with Route 26 is that the bus comes from a long distance. If there was a bus that followed the same route but started at North Bethesda Metro, this would greatly increase functioning. I think this is what the BRT is for here. Okay, I think this is all the questions in the chat box. And Daniel, I see your hands are up again. Is that by accident or you have another question to follow up?
I just want to clarify what I wrote about the 26.
Okay.
The BRT seems to introduce this new bus that goes from the North Bethesda Metro to Montgomery Mall. But if you didn't build it as a BRT, but just put a bus in that did that in ordinary traffic, it would greatly increase the utility of the 26. The real problem with the 26 is that by the time it gets to Old Georgetown Road, it's frequently way off schedule. So people find that they come out, I've done it, you go out to Old Georgetown Road to take the bus a short distance, and it appears to take a very long time before the bus appears. And the reason for that is because it starts way over on the eastern side of the county, and it's coming a long distance and it's hitting traffic along the way. So instead of building the BRT, if you just changed it to a bus that ran much more frequently along Old Georgetown Road, maybe that would solve the problem without having to spend $100 million.
Yeah, Daniel, we can definitely relay this comment to our colleagues at the county, the ride-on folks who are planning the service, and they often optimize the service. But thank you for your comment and the suggestion. And Krista, you add another questions. Will there be a survey to homeowners in the surrounding areas where the results will be made publicly available? So we plan to engage with the CAC again in the fall, and this recording and the slides will be made available online. But any report and analysis down the road will also be made available on the project website.
And I'll also add that there was a project survey that was completed early on. If you go to the project website that was posted earlier in a comment, you can assess a lot of the project files there. One of those includes a story map that does have the results from that survey. About 500 were completed.
And so, Crystal, you were asking no service specific to homeowners. Okay, that survey would address to, I guess, including homeowners, right?
Yeah, I was going to say it was advertised to individuals within the study area through email, social media, pop-up events within the area, bus stop chats, as well as these stakeholder meetings. In terms of a homeowner survey based on what potential impacts could occur from a preferred moving forward, that wouldn't occur until this project is much further along, I would believe.
Okay, I think Bart just said we did not receive it, and we have 134 home community right on Old Georgetown Road. we can certainly, yeah, take these comments back, see, yeah, what else county needs to do to engage with the community. So yeah, we'll take these comments. What year was that? Okay, I think Crystal was asked about.
Probably end of 2022, early 2023, I would believe. I
Okay,
would have to go back since this has been
yeah,
going on for a little over
yeah.
2 years.
Yep, yeah, we'll certainly take your another comment in terms of notice should be provided through the registry of the communities.
Yeah, and I will just note that like right now is not necessarily like an official engagement period through this CAC. Obviously, we're here to take comments and we've been documenting everything, but there will be more formal outreach as a draft preferred alternative is developed and continues to move forward. And that will be distributed through the email list, everyone who's participated at any point within this project, that can be provided to anybody else to continue participation.
Okay. I think Nancy, you added in a chat box question. Do you have a way of analyzing in your ridership studies that if existing regular bus frequency vastly increased, that their ridership would increase in proportion? Lucas, I see you nodding. You want to respond to this one?
I mean, it's a great question, and definitely one of the kind of the fundamental relationships in transit planning. The models that we use certainly can test sensitivity. There's also other previous research studies that have tried to kind of it relies on so many different factors as well to understand. There's no exact formula for if you increase the frequency, you can expect X percentage ridership. But certainly there is that general relationship, which is fed into some of the model work. And the opposite is true, right? There's also been research that shows that if you decrease frequency, it decreases the ridership and attractiveness of the service as well.
Okay, so let's see. Karen, you had another question. Is there joint planning among the BRT project, Ride-On, and the WMATA? So Ride-On is definitely a stakeholder. I would say, yeah, it's part of the project team, and this project connects to Metro Rail station. So at some point, WMATA will be as well, but I'm not sure if they are at the moment. Lucas, you want?
Throughout this effort, we've been meeting with specific jurisdictional and other agency stakeholders to get their feedback, as well as working with the two ongoing initiatives that WMATA is doing with the Better Bus Network redesign. There are proposals out currently, and then Montgomery County Ride-On has also been working on the Ride-On Reimagined study as well, to look at what the future bus network looks like. So a lot of ongoing planning, but certainly coordinated with those efforts. And as we get closer to any implementation, that's when you start getting into the levels of looking at the different schedules and the timing, things like that.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Lucas. Few more questions from Crystal. Will you include in your analysis a no build but increase frequency?
Yeah, so I mean, what Crystal's describing here really is that TSM alternative of increasing bus service along the corridor. That definitely is included in our analysis, and certainly part of the consideration.
Mm-hmm.
So there's the no build, which is do nothing. The transportation system management is increasing the frequencies and some selected technology investments, but no construction of dedicated lanes or things like that. And then the build alternative, add those. The big change there is the dedicated lanes for transit. So what you're describing is certainly on the table of what we're analyzing.
Yep. Okay, I think that also addressed your next couple of sentences in terms of having that TSM being part of the alternative analysis, and the no build as the status quo. Okay, I think you just added one more. No build results included the increased frequency. Lucas, you're on mute. Yeah, if you're speaking.
Yeah, sorry. Can you go to the slide where we talk with the four alternatives? So there's a difference between the no build and the TSM. So the no build does not include any increased frequency. It's basically what transit service is out there today. The TSM would include increased service levels, and then the build alternatives include the infrastructure as well as even further increased frequency during the peak periods. Hopefully that helps clarify. Or
okay. Yeah,
again.
Krista, feel free to unmute yourself. I see your hands is up.
Okay, thank you. I figured it'd just be easier to ask. So
yeah.
Thank you for showing this slide. That being said, I maybe I missed it, but then when you show the alternatives comparing where you had like the different tables, I didn't see the TSM. I saw like the last one where you showed the difference, the numbers, if it went from a 5 to a 6 or a 2 to a 1. All I saw was no build, alternate 1, and alternate 2. So where does the analysis and the results from the TSM fall in comparison to those others? Maybe I missed that slide, but I know that the last slide you showed did not include that option.
Yeah, so that's a good point. So for the traffic results specifically, the TSM results weren't shown because there would essentially be the same as the no build because we're basically just increasing bus frequency. So just the bus frequency itself would not have no noticeable impact on the overall congestion. But we should clarify that for future that that those traffic results.
I think that would be good because I don't know how that's the conclusion. Like, just it sounds more like it's an assumption than a conclusion based on real data. So, not saying that the real data doesn't exist. It's just not here in this presentation. And as I mentioned, I've ridden the bus. I drive. I ride the bike lanes. I do use the bike lanes. I walk. I use all forms of transportation, and I also happen to live right along Old Georgetown Road. And one of the only reasons I don't take the bus more, like to and from the metro, is because it comes every 30 minutes. It's easier for me to just drive, or heck, sometimes it's even just easier to just walk. But that's the only reason. So, I mean, I think that that's an important distinction, that you may be losing ridership because I've never seen these buses full ever. And there may be increased ridership without the negative impacts to homeowners and cost and other things that are associated with BRT that could just be solved in other ways. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, Karen, you have your hands up. Yeah, please unmute yourself.
Yes, just to key off, was that Crystal speaking just now?
That was Crystal just speaking, yeah.
Okay, great points. And I'll just add the times I've seen the bus, the 26 route full are around when the high school gets out. And on, I think, Saturday morning, when the presumably a lot of employees either at Westfield, Montgomery, or further downstream who make a connection there are going to work on the weekend. Anecdotally.
Yeah, great. That's a great piece of information.
Thank you for that. Thank you for your experience. I think we all have different experiences, but even from that example, I mean, we're talking what, 20% of the total time. versus 100% of impact to the surrounding communities.
Oh,
So I mean,
absolutely.
I just think that there might need to be more data points analyzed here. I don't have enough to say whether I am for or against it, other than the fact that I really hope that this doesn't include taking land from our community, such that you can build this and then we have to deal with it.
Oh.
Some of our dealings with the county and other projects have not been well. They hold these meetings, you do surveys, and we think impact is being our concerns are being heard, but the reality is that the meeting is more a checkbox and decisions are already being made. Now, I'm not saying that this is the case. I don't get that from you all, but that is something that we're cognizant of based on past experience. So I really hope that this isn't going to be a repeat of that, because the county has not done well in other communications with other projects. And as homeowners, we're left to just suffer the consequences and until we just run out of steam fighting it. So I just think that there's some other considerations that need to be made, and hopefully that these comments will be taken into consideration before any final decisions are made. So thank you.
Yeah, and Crystal, I was actually agreeing with you. I was just suggesting that perhaps there's something else that could be done for those peak times. So we're on the same page. And I don't live on Old Georgetown, by the way. So.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you both. Bart, you have your hands up.
Sure. Karen sort of answered what I was going to say, because I got the same impression that she was agreeing with what Crystal said, and the notion of increased frequency during critical times, that you do a survey, you go and see what's happening, and as the flow is increasing, those are the critical times to measure and say, hey, if we added an extra bus or two, does that solve our issue? One of the things two things that concern me are, number one, when the bike lane, a lot is being done to Old Georgetown Road that is causing an increase in travel time, congestion, and everything else, right? So you have the bike lanes that came into existence without significant or any real contact with residents by the state. And I'm not putting that on you guys, right? That was the state doing it without community involvement. Then you have new school being built right in the midst of where you're looking at putting this rapid transit system, which will increase traffic dramatically. And if you want to see what happens when you have a school that opens, somebody on your team should go over to Walter Johnson this fall during drop off and pickup time and see what it looks like in front of that school, and imagine how that would apply on Old Georgetown Road, where it does not have the same access points as Walter Johnson does. And that will give you a very good idea of what you're going to be experiencing by either trying to add a dedicated bus lane, or on either side or in the middle, and how that would actually operate in practice, especially during school drop-off and pickup. So Old Georgetown Road is really getting beaten up, and the people who live here and who use it are feeling the brunt of all of that. This process of the Flash, and we really appreciate having these meetings, and you all have been extremely open, and I'll echo what Crystal said, that we are getting the impression that you are open to our comments, unlike other engagement that we've had with other folks. But it does give the impression that a huge initial piece was sort of jumped over by coming up with the build options at this stage, instead of somebody saying, hey, look, if we want to increase ridership, let's first measure the ridership, and two, add additional buses and see what happens. That, to me, would have been a first step before coming up with all of the alternatives to that and investing all of your time, all of our time, all of whoever's time at the Department of Transportation to study, multiple alternatives that may never be needed. So I'm a little bit confused how we jumped past those initial studies that everybody seems to be talking about now and saying, well, we're not saying we're definitely going to build something, but once people invest their time and energies like you all have, there is often a momentum that continues. And it's incredibly hard to pull that back and say, wait a minute, we didn't really have to do all that because we could have solved what is now a non-existent issue, but we're looking at the future by increasing frequency. So I am concerned that, yes, you're talking about considering a no build option and increasing frequency, but yet at the same rate, all of this effort has been done to come up with these other options that may never be needed. So it doesn't give the impression to the community that that is really a viable possibility, even though we're being told that it is. It does not convey that same way. So I don't know if I'm past that point, but in future projects, if that's really an option, I would strongly encourage you to say, look, we're going to study this first before we start coming up with how to solve something that may not need to be solved, right? Because nobody is saying, hey, we have a problem now with this. Everything you guys have been talking about is estimating what's going to happen in the future. Right now, we have unbelievable congestion. Emergency vehicles cannot get through Old Georgetown Road. When it's backed up past Woodward, when you're heading south, you're literally backed up for more than a quarter mile and an ambulance comes. There is no way that a car at the intersection of Tuckerman and Old Georgetown can go safely through that intersection to allow the emergency vehicle through. It is physically impossible and unsafe. Nobody can do that. So having a bus lane there will be incredibly challenging, even more so than it is now. So I'll just leave you with that. I don't mean to sit here and talk without a question, but it's already extremely, extremely challenging, and adding a bus lane will only make it worse. Thank you all very much, though.
Sorry, I just realized I was talking muted, but yeah, thank you, Bart, for the comments. All right, we have a lot of good comments and discussion tonight, and we are getting to the end of this meeting. Again, here's my contact information. Feel free to reach out if you have any other thought you want to share. But again, I really appreciate the input you all provided this evening, and yeah, thank you for the consultant team for going through the presentation and the analysis. We'll take this back and continue our work, and we'll provide more update after the summer in the fall. With that, we'll adjourn this meeting. Yeah, thank you, everyone. Have a good evening.
Thank you, everyone.
Are we doing a? Are we done, or are we staying on?
I mean, I guess Joshine left. So I guess we're done.
Let's end it. All right.
All right, good job, Lucas. Yeah, I might send something, but we have our bi-weekly next Tuesday, so maybe we'll just summarize everything that we heard in the next day or two, and then regroup next week.
Sounds good.
All right, thanks, Lucas. Good night, everyone.
Bye.